Upcoming professional development 0. I don't know how important that is, but it doesn't seem like a good number. So let me get this straight. You just described to us in detail everything that's wrong with lectures and traditional education that's not individualized, but yet you're putting people on a track to go to a university that recognizes the International Baccalaureate program. You're just sending students on the same track to get to the same place as everyone else through a slightly different route.
If we want to prepare our children for the modern world, if we want learning to be effective and engaging, then there's no doubt that we need to fundamentally change our system of education.
Yeah, I don't think that really means anything.
There is a growing feeling today that something is wrong with our system of education.
I agree.
But what is it? Well, we send our children to school to
That's the problem right there. We send our children to school. That's what we should change, I think.
prepare them for the real world, which is changing very, very fast.
So let's go over that again. Prepare them for the real world. Probably true enough, right? I hesitate to agree with it just because the real world is so vague and it's going to be a bit different for everyone, right? Like, we've got all these people that, look kind of the same. They're all dressed in business wear and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, you've got millions of people that have to go through the same system, but are going to have a bunch of completely different outcomes. So that's one thing. And then another thing, they say the world is changing very, very fast, but changing fast, what about the world is changing fast such that we should change education?
But our schools haven't changed much for hundreds of years.
I might have jumped the gun a little bit on that one. So the real world is changing fast, but the school system hasn't changed for hundreds of years. Okay, let's break that down. School has changed in the past couple hundred years. I don't know about you, but I don't ever remember them teaching programming or using augmented reality or VR in classes 100 years ago. I don't think that was a thing. So school has changed. I think it's just one or two things about school that haven't changed that you're going to fixate on and use that as an argument to go to your school instead.
In fact, thought leaders from around the world agree that the current system of education was designed in the industrial age mainly to churn out factory workers.
Okay. We've got two quotes saying that education was designed for the industrial age, that education is industrial, quote unquote. Okay. Industrial sounds bad, and it brings up things about education that we don't like its rigidity, right? Okay. Because the assumption is that when you're coming to this video, you already don't like the current education system. Fine. But this doesn't really say anything. There's not really any proof that whatever this industrialness means, there's not any proof that it's inherently bad. You're just going to think it's bad because you already don't like the education system. And another thing is, I can find some other quotes that disagree with these quotes. We've got Medium. We've got Washington Post. Now, this might be in agreement with them. Okay, here's the same video. That's interesting. Here's another quote saying that it's a myth. Educational historians describe the phrase as misleading and an inaccurate representation of the development of American public education. All right. Well, here's some quotes for you. Although there may be, some more problems with these quotes. Just like there may be some problems with these quotes. Every quote is going to be taken out of context, but I think I've more than demonstrated that it's not as cut and dry as school is industrial, therefore school bad. You haven't proven that school is industrial, whatever that means. And there's also no proof that industrial means bad. As scary as it might sound to say industrial.
And this industrial age mentality of mass production and mass control still runs deep in schools.
Mass production and mass control. Okay. Mass control is pretty much just fear mongering. Like, yes, it's true that any large system that's catering to a lot of people and children, that's a powerful position. Agreed. But I don't know if I would conclude that the school system is designed to control people. I think that's just preying on people's fears and a bunch of conspiracy theories is what it really comes down to. There's plenty of people out there that'll just completely buy into this and say, "Oh yes, of course. The government wants to control our children. That's why we can't put them in school." Well, if you don't like what's being done in school, it's certainly your right to keep your children out of school, and I hope it continues to be your right. But to dismiss the entire education system as a system of control, it's not taking into consideration the fact that a lot of teachers are just people. The system of mass control is largely perpetuated by individuals that kind of just want the best for you and your children. Now, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, sure, but I think we should stop short of demonizing everyone in the education industry just because it's a system of control. Sure, they have power. That doesn't mean they're trying to control you. There's not some big boogeyman out there. Now, a system of mass production. How else would you figure out how to educate millions of people while also not spending a ridiculous amount of money? Let's see what their concerns are.
Industrial age values. We educate children by batches and govern their lives by ringing bells.
Okay. The ringing bells thing, I'm going to say that's just a coincidence. Okay? Just cuz there happen to be bells in other parts of the world, in other realms in the past, doesn't mean you can't use bells anywhere without being called industrial.
All day long, students do nothing but follow instructions. Sit down, take out your books, turn to page 40, solve problem number 3.
Again, how else would you prefer this be done? We've got the time of one highly trained individual and a much larger number of people that need to get this individual's knowledge. How else, if we're talking about a system that's in person, how else is this individual supposed to disseminate their knowledge?
Stop talking.
If you paid some money to hear what a highly trained individual had to say, would you like to be in a room with a bunch of loud people that are distracting you? Or would you like to be in a quiet, orderly room where everyone's following along and going along with the plan that this highly trained individual has drawn up because this highly trained individual thinks that this is the best way for you to get this information? Yes, admittedly, whatever plan the teacher might draw up, it might be imperfect. It might be the worst, most boring lecture that you've ever attended. But how else are you going to give this information to a bunch of people? And I should also point out that this doesn't have to be exactly how a classroom looks like. They're pointing out some extreme examples of, and of course, being asking a student to be quiet is not an extreme example, but they leave out the parts of a lecture where the teacher might call on some students to answer questions. Is that an industrial age value? I don't know.
At school, you're rewarded for doing exactly what you're told.
Is this different from the real world? How do we determine what the real world is? What are the real world skills that are most important? Well, a lot of jobs are in the service industry. Doing what someone asks you to do is worth money if you know how to do that thing. Paying attention to the instructions that are given to you is very important and valuable. If you've ever gone to any fast food restaurant and been served by someone who didn't follow your instructions, you will experience the frustration that they seem to be advocating for.
These are industrial age values that were really important for factory workers. Their success depended on following instructions and doing exactly what they were told.
Do these hypothetical factory workers get called upon to answer questions? No? Then how does it relate to what happens in a classroom? I don't think it actually does.
But in today's world, how far can you get by simply following instructions? The modern world values people who can be creative, who can communicate their ideas, and collaborate with others.
Are these the most common jobs? Does everyone have a job where they're working at a computer, wearing a tie? Well, I mean, you wear a tie at like a retail or something, maybe, but I don't think these are the most common jobs. Like, certainly they're becoming more common, but giving a presentation is not something you're going to do right out of high school. Maybe you need to do that eventually. And yeah, creativity is useful and potentially valuable. But I think what's more valuable in general is just solving people's problems, doing something that someone will pay you for. I don't know that you lose the ability to be creative after going through primary school or secondary school. Despite having been in school for way too long, spent 7 years in college, I still find that I'm pretty creative. I think my main concern is that I've wasted time in school. Not that I've somehow become someone less than I could have been. I mean, sure, if I had like a custom tailored education where it was just me one on one with a variety of teachers that waited on me hand and foot, that always taught me exactly what I needed to learn right at that exact minute, sure. If I had infinite money, maybe I could have gotten a better education and learned more skills more quickly. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the ideal education. We're talking about an education that has to work for a lot of people and has to be reasonably priced.
But our children don't get a chance to develop such skills in a system that's based on industrial age values.
That's simply not true. You can develop whatever skills you want when you're not in school. Sure, if you have to spend a lot of hours in school, you're going to have a hard time developing other skills, but it doesn't make it impossible.
Lack of autonomy and control. At school, our children experience a complete lack of autonomy and control.
Is this inherently a bad thing if it's for a limited period of time? What specifically do you want children to be doing besides sitting down and learning things? I would think that learning things efficiently, although it's hard work, is a valuable, useful way to spend your time. Although that may limit your autonomy, it may limit your autonomy to do things that are not very fun. Is nevertheless likely to be useful.
Every minute of a child's life is tightly controlled by the system.
That's a bit hyperbolic. It's not literally every minute of their life. And again, the system is just meant to scare people that are afraid of the government.
But in today's world, if you're doing important work, then you're managing your own time. You're making your
Okay, one thing, meeting with the CEO. I'm 26 and I've never met with a CEO. Sure. Your kid can have meetings with CEOs all they want. That's fine. And I think that if they are in a position to be meeting with a CEO, they probably will have picked up some planning and time management skills somehow, some way.
own decisions regarding what to do and when to do it. But life at school looks very different. The system is sending a dangerous message to our children that they are not in charge of their own lives.
The system is sending a message. You're going to have to define what you mean by sending a message because that seems very vague. Is this like one of those invisible secret messages? Is this like subliminal? Is there actually any proof?
To our children that they are not in charge of their own lives.
Children shouldn't be in charge of their own lives. I think that's what parents should be doing. What do you think a child would do if they were completely in charge of their own life? Do you think that they would be spending their time in a productive way without guidance? I think not. I think that we should incentivize good behaviors for our children. One way to do that is by giving them good grades when they learn something well. Now, you can argue that that is flawed, but in principle, it seems like it's in the right direction, and it doesn't seem particularly dangerous to me.
They just have to follow whatever is laid down instead of taking charge and making the most of their lives.
So implicitly, they're saying if you don't let your child do what they want, then they're not making the most of their lives. I think anyone who's been a parent, and this is not me, will have a plethora of practical examples where they've told their child not to do what they want to be doing because the parent wants them to make the most of their lives. I think a more common problem is children playing video games too much, doing what they want to do, and not making the most of their lives.
Experts believe autonomy is incredibly important for children. It's no wonder then that our children are bored and demotivated by school.
Again, some quotes. I think all the arguments I've laid out make these quotes irrelevant. I don't care how much fun your kid is having when they're playing video games. They still need to spend some time preparing for adulthood, learning discipline, learning marketable skills, and applying themselves. Is there even a way to educate someone without limiting their freedom? Unless an individual is actually motivated to go and learn something, you're gonna have to limit their freedom to get them to learn something. Is the problem that some children just aren't motivated to learn?
Can you imagine how you would feel if you were told exactly what to do for every minute of your life?
Adults, who are the target audience of this video, if I'm not mistaken, because they're the ones with the money who are going to purchase this schooling, presumably. Adults, in a sense, voluntarily choose to be told what to do for 8 hours, 5 days a week, because they get paid for it. But I think most adults, when they get confronted with this idea, they're going to think to themselves during their free time, I don't want to be told what to do. Or they're going to think of some hyperbolic example where there's someone standing over them, telling them what to do. But someone standing over them, telling them what to do, that's not even what happens in school. Like, in a sense, there's someone standing over you. but you actually you have some choice in how much you pay attention. You can take notes, you can do homework. Those are choices that you make. If an individual literally had no choices, then everyone would be getting the same grade. You get a grade because you actually have to do something in order to get that grade. So there is a level of effort. There is, and since there are choices to be made, there is hence an amount of autonomy. I guess we're just debating about the correct degree of autonomy, which I don't know. Again, there's practical concerns.
Inauthentic learning. Most of the learning that happens in schools today is not authentic because it relies on memorization and rote learning.
If you memorize how to do something, have you not learned how to do that thing? What distinguishes authentic learning from inauthentic learning?
The system defines a generic set of knowledge that all children must know. And
Is it practical to have an individualized education for every child? I don't think so. There always will be some debate about whether the set of information that you pick up in school is the right set of information. I think that's a reasonable debate to have, but again, you can't, unless you're proposing something really different, then I don't think you're gonna be able to get away from this whole concept of a standard set of knowledge.
then, every few months we measure how much has been retained by administering exams.
Now, I've watched this a bit before. I know what they're going to say. They're going to say that, in essence, tests are meaningless. Well, how else do you propose that we know whether someone knows how to do something? By definition, you need a test. An interview for a job is a test. Tests are good as long as they're testing what you care about.
We know that such learning is not authentic because most of it is gone the day after the exam.
Is the fact that students forget what they learned long enough to take the test a problem with the education system? Is it a problem with testing? Is it a problem with each individual? Sometimes students actually remember the things that they got tested on, and those are usually in the subjects that they're interested in. I know this because I'm one of those people that still remember practically everything I learned about math because I love math and I always have. It doesn't mean that a test is wrong when a person forgets everything they just took the test on because they don't care about it.
Learning can be much deeper and more authentic.
Can it though? Is the depth that you're talking about not just a result of someone caring about the subject? I think rather than criticizing the concept of tests, we should be figuring out how to best get people to care about the subjects that they have to learn about, or change what they have to learn about. Either way, once you've decided on some set of things that they have to learn about, you're still going to come back to this problem of, well, you have to motivate some people to learn about it.
It can be so much more than just memorization and retention. But that's the only thing we measure, and test scores are the only thing we value.
Tests are valuable because they measure a person's ability to do something. How else can you measure a person's ability to do something without a test? No matter what you call it, it's still a test. When you're measuring someone's ability to do something, it's, for all practical concerns, a test.
This has created an extremely unhealthy culture for students, parents, and teachers. Children are going through endless hours of tuitions, staying up all night memorizing useless facts that they will forget very soon.
That's as if to say that the entirety of education is useless. Even I, as someone who criticizes higher education and education in general, don't think that literally everything that you will learn is useless. The problem comes from making people learn things that they don't want to learn.
No room for passions and interests.
Probably a bit hyperbolic. You don't spend literally every waking minute in school.
We have an extremely standardized system where each child must learn the same thing at the same time in the same way as everyone else.
That's not strictly true, if depending on how you define the system, because of course there's clubs and extra. I don't know how well the concept of electives from college translates to primary school and secondary education, because it's been a long time since I've been in that kind of school. But I definitely remember that there were extracurricular activities you could be in, and you could there are choices involved, right? There are aspects of it that are not standardized, but they're still part of the system.
This doesn't respect the basic fact of being human, that each of us is unique and different in our own way.
The fact that an educational product has a set of standard things that they're teaching to a wide array of people does not mean that the educational product does not respect individuals. Are you suggesting a system that literally custom tailors education to each individual? That is practically impossible. How much are you willing to pay for your child's education? An hour of a professor's time is very expensive. And unless you have a large group of people each paying a little bit, you're going to have to foot the entire bill for all the professor's time or all the teacher's time in this case. And if it's not you footing the bill, it's the government. And at the end of the day, you.
We all have different passions and interests. And the key to fulfillment in life is to find your passion.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that.
But do the schools of today help our children find and develop their passion?
Is that what you're paying your teacher for? Is that the educational product that you purchased? Did you purchase a way for your child to find their passion? Or would you prefer that that's something that they do in their spare time? Think about that.
There seems to be no room in the current education system for the most important questions in a child's life. What am I good at? What do I want to do in life?
It's almost as if the education system was not designed to find an individual's passions or to develop their personality.
How do I fit into this world? The system doesn't seem to care. There are so many greatly talented people who failed in the traditional school system.
This just kind of seems off topic. It seems like they're trying to argue that school should be different, and then they kind of just throw this in, and it doesn't. I don't see how it relates, but this is an obvious survivor fallacy. I forget the exact name of the fallacy. It's something like that. Just because you could find one or two successful people that didn't do well in primary or secondary school doesn't mean that the other several million people who did equally well in life and also did well in primary and secondary school don't exist. They still exist. I think it's more common that people get through the earlier grades with average grades and then do average in life. I don't think that some random examples are really proof of anything.
Fortunately, they were able to overcome these failures, but not everyone can. We have no measure for how much talent, how much potential goes unrecognized in the current system.
Is recognizing talent the job of the teacher providing you this educational product? I think the teacher kind of just already has a plan of what information they're going to go over, and then they just deliver that information. I think your problem is that you place way too much emphasis on this educational product. If you're looking for fulfillment and finding your passions in school, you're looking in the wrong place. School doesn't have to be that.
Differences in how we learn. Each of us is also different in how we learn, in how much time we take to learn something, and what tools and resources work best for us.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But the system has no room for such differences. So,
By design, so that it's inexpensive.
if you're a bit slow in learning something, you are considered a failure.
I don't think that when someone does poorly in school, the correct reaction is to label the whole person a failure. Who labels them a failure out of curiosity? Just because an individual fails to learn a particular topic, in a sense, they are a failure at learning that topic, but that doesn't mean that the school is telling them their entire life is a failure. Their existence is a failure. I think it's a very small minority of teachers that will be insane enough to believe something like that. No, I think more often the case is sometimes people fail and that's okay. And stating that someone has failed shouldn't be forbidden.
when all you needed was a bit more time to catch up.
Time is a relevant factor in defining success in the real world, and I think what you're advocating for is that schools should mirror that in some respects. If you can do the same thing as someone else, but it will take you twice as long, you can't expect to be paid the same hourly rate as the other person. And in a lot of cases, when time is critical, you won't even be considered because it is simply too long to wait. Time is relevant. Now, from a learner's perspective, if you're taking longer to learn something than other people, you have options. You can seek out additional resources. You can study harder. There is an unfortunate reality that stupid people exist, and stupid people probably will learn slowly, more slowly than the majority of everyone else. And unfortunately, the school just isn't designed, the school system as a product is not, it's just not individualized to that extent. If you want an individualized education, you will probably have to pay more money.
Lecturing. In the current system, children are lectured for more than 5 hours a day.
How else do you propose that individuals receive this information? Would you prefer that they read a textbook for 5 hours a day? Would you prefer that they watch a lecture video for 5 hours a day? However you slice it, if you have to do something for 5 hours a day, it's going to be kind of lame.
But there are a few big problems with lecturing. Sal Khan from Khan Academy calls lecturing a fundamentally dehumanizing experience.
I tend to think that that's taken out of context, but let's say for argument that Sal Khan said exactly that, that being lectured to is fundamentally dehumanizing. Do you feel dehumanized if you attend a TED Talk? Do you feel dehumanized when you attend a political rally? Do you feel dehumanized when you attend an awards ceremony? All of those are scenarios where you have a person standing in front of a bunch of people talking to them. That's not dehumanizing.
30 kids with fingers on their lips, not allowed to interact with each other.
Would you prefer that the people around you were loud and obnoxious and didn't allow you to focus or concentrate?
Also, in any given classroom, different students are at different levels of understanding. Now, whatever the teacher does, there are bound to be students who are either bored because they are ahead or confused because they're behind. Because of the internet and digital media, our children have at their fingertips all the information in the world. Technology has made it possible for anyone to learn anything. But for fear of losing control, the system is not leveraging these incredible resources.
I don't think that the system should be personified like you have just done it. I don't think that there is a group of individuals that have all decided that students will be forbidden from using Google. If there is such a group, I think you would need to provide more evidence than just stating it without proof. I also fail to see how having a wealth of online resources available to you changes the fact that students learn at different rates. If a student is having a hard time learning something, being able to learn the same thing somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to be easier necessarily or take less time.
Our system of education, which evolved in the industrial age, has become outdated and ineffective.
Outdated? I don't know if there's any point that you can say an individual speaking to a group of people in order to share knowledge is outdated.
In the industrial age has become outdated and ineffective.
Ineffective? It depends on what the effect is that you're trying to get from the education. I think a more likely argument is that we're just focusing on the wrong things. I think that's a much easier thing to prove because, well, we've got a bunch of tests that show that people do learn things. It's not as if an individual that goes from third grade to fourth grade has literally learned nothing, or else the classes couldn't be different. There is a progression of classes that you go through as you go from one grade to another. And for that to be possible, you have to learn things because the subsequent classes are designed so that they depend on prior knowledge. So, for the majority of people, there is an effect. They learn things. I don't think you can deny that people learn things sometimes when they are in school.
If we want to prepare our children for the modern world, if we want learning to be effective and engaging, then there's no doubt that we need to fundamentally change our system of education.
Yeah, I don't think that really means anything. Let's take a look at this school. Okay, it's in India. I don't know much about India's educational system, so let's take a look at the curriculum. I don't know what I expected. IB stands for International Baccalaureate. So they chose an International Baccalaureate. They're an authorized world school, currently a candidate school for the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. Okay, what is this International Baccalaureate all about? Okay, so upcoming professional development 0. I don't know how important that is, but it doesn't seem like a good number. And something really sticks out to me here. Their selling point seems to be that universities recognize this International Baccalaureate. So let me get this straight. You just described to us in detail everything that's wrong with lectures and traditional education that's not individualized, but yet you think it's perfectly reasonable that students get this degree that's not really a degree. At least they're on track to get this degree, because this seems to be, I don't know whether this is all inclusive. This seems to be more focused on, primary school, which is, just one step in this track. But you're putting people on a track to go to a university that recognizes the International Baccalaureate program. But yet you say that you're against traditional education. Why would you be concerned with people being able to go to traditional universities? Unless everything that you talked about was just a bunch of rhetoric to convince people that you were different, when in reality, you're just sending students on the same track to get to the same place as everyone else through a slightly different route. Oh, look. It looks like there's an individual giving a lecture to a group of people. That's terrible. That's dehumanizing, according to Sal Khan, supposedly. School 2.0. We designed world-class facilities. Ah, I see. This seems like a good way to spend your money. I want to pay for my child to spend a lot of time in this fancy building that's all glass. Ah, doesn't this look fun? Oh, hey, look, there's some information. But Yeah, it seems like you're going to be paying a lot of money for all this fancy furniture. Yep, just pay a bunch of money for your kids to seemingly do nothing different. Is this actually a superior educational product? Or is it the same educational product with some fancy, colorful furniture? Will your kids actually get a better education? Do you think it's reasonable to pay for access to all this glass and this foosball table and whatever the heck is going on here? Is this the right place to spend your money if at the end of the day you're just going to end up at the same university as everyone else? As far as I can tell, there's not quite enough that's different about this to warrant investing in it, especially since their big promotional video was mostly nonsense that was horribly misleading, hyperbolic, and also full of lies at times.